Hey guys, it's BlockchainBrad, and today we're talking about Cardstack, a very exciting and complex protocol and architecture. And to explain this further, we have Chris Tse. Chris is the founding director. So thank you very much, Chris, for being on the channel.
Nice to be here.
So obviously, Chris, you do represent something quite complex, and obviously to do that you need to be well positioned and have a strong background in this area. So Chris, can you tell us about yourself and why you really are best positioned to be in this director role?
Yes. So I began my career as a technologist, working on the bringing technology to the masses through design, product management, psychology, and user experience. I did my computer science degree in Columbia University in New York, and since then I focus not just on the most cutting edge technology, but more about adapting those technology and connecting those technologies to real world experiences. So I was part of a company that sold a data analytic startup to a big media conglomerate in New York called McGraw-Hill, and that was big data before there's a term for that. But we found a way to deliver that value with through the web or through even printed material, where the results of these analytics can be accessible to people en masse, millions of people receiving data analytics basically in the mail to start and then move them online when they're ready. So to me, when I had the opportunity to continue working in the media industry, in the technology industry, really learning about how to apply, web technology to transform digital media, it became clear that a lot of those advanced cloud technology that was very esoteric became commonplace when people are logging into website or doing their taxes online and such like that, and getting financial advice and services. And when the blockchain happened in Bitcoin, and then more concretely for me, when Ethereum happened in Switzerland when that was formed, it became clear to me that the same thing is playing out again, that these advanced technology, this amazing new protocol will one day need that on-ramp to make that much usable, and then we'll get the same distribution that mobile app has, but it's going to be a very different type of arrangement because we have this spirit of decentralization. So how do you do decentralization, which is an ideal, with the practicality of a simple on-ramp without re-centralizing it around a single entity, whether it's Coinbase or whatever it might be. So that's what Cardstack is really about, to build an experience layer that is easy to use but maintain the spirit that there's going to be competition and there's going to be variety, and different people can work together towards a common goal whilst showing enough diversity that allows this thing to thrive without the monoculture.
Well, Chris, let's pull it back a bit, because obviously that was quite a lot of information about your background, and we started to move into Cardstack, and we're going to explore that. But let's expand on some of the statements that are made of Cardstack itself. For example, it says that you are the experience layer, as you alluded to, of the decentralized internet. Now, that is one thing in itself. Let's explore that in a moment. But it also says one thing further. It explains that you are open source framework, and you are a consensus protocol that makes blockchains usable and scalable for the masses. So let's explain this really carefully, because it is very complex. Why are you regarded as an experience layer? Why the focus on that particularly?
Yes, I think one way to think about the word experience layer is that the keyword is actually not experience. The keyword is layer, right? So the truth is that the blockchain is many things. People use different wallets, different protocols. You need different on-ramps. Sometimes you need a application. Sometimes you don't. Sometimes you need a plugin. Sometimes you need just a piece of paper. And that is really uneven. So if you want to really truly participate in all the blockchain projects, you have a lot of work to do, whether it's from custody all the way to actually using the token for utility, which is much more challenging. And very few people have actually done it. And if we have to build application that taps into decentralized file storage, decentralized identity, decentralized everything, it is basically impossible. So the way in computer science we do is that we'll put a layer on top of that thing, create an abstraction, unify it, orchestrate it, and that allows you to build real application and deliver that service. We call that the experience layer because we're working top down, right? A lot of layers in blockchain is layer 1 is the blockchain, layer 2 is state channel or like lightning or whatever it might be. So that's not the experience layer. That's just a layer for a more efficient processing or delay settlement, basically. But the user is in layer 7, 8, 9, 10. That slap a layer on the top where the user experience begin is what we call the experience layer, or even experience layers, right? It could be plural. And it's only when you get to the point where you meet the current blockchain projects in the middle, somewhere in the middle, do we actually connect the true promise of decentralization of the protocol with the real needs that users have every day in their digital lives.
I see.
So we're working on that top part.
Okay, so you're user-driven essentially in terms of your layering. Yes. That's a really key point. Now let's explore a fundamental aspect, and that is the problems that drove you to build this. No doubt you saw them in the marketplace, clearly in the centralized space. Let's explore them specifically and why you are redressing them.
Yes. Well, I think it's very clear that anybody who has ever tried to get into crypto, your first 24 hours is bewildering. And I went through that myself. Like, what is a hierarchical deterministic wallet? How do I get to this? Every step of the way. I mean, it's a very secure system. Bitcoin, especially, the protocol itself has really withstood all the tests you can throw at it. But when I'm using it, I feel very insecure. I feel like I'm about to make a mistake constantly. I'm doubting myself and second guessing whether I'm doing the right things. Sure. And that's really what drove me to say, this got to be better than that. Because if we want this technology to have the impact in the world that we write about in blog posts and Medium think pieces, there's a huge gap between the actual experience that is today to what we believe is needed. Even if you're not a real skeptic, just like a believer that like acknowledges that there is a gap. And that's what drove me to this, is that I know, having built technologies in my career and having seen technology built and used them both in an enterprise and personal setting, there is a gap in the tooling and tool sets. And that's why I believe that the driver to unify all these different new parts that will make up this new whole of the decentralized internet requires a little bit more focus on how the user's going to get on day one, minute one, hour one, day one, and that's what we focused on.
I see. So essentially what you're saying is that the suite of tools that were on offer when we see the first iterations of blockchain just weren't robust enough, just weren't trustable enough to really invest in. And what you saw is essentially that gap, that problem. So let's now talk about, let's extend that beyond that to apps and dApps. And you talk about silos in your website and in your presentations. That's a big thing as well. Let's explore that. Why is that a big problem?
Well, I think it's very easy to kind of visualize the silo problem when you open up your phone. You want to talk to your friend and you have to say, is my friend in Facebook, in my iMessage? Does he have an iPhone? Does he use Google? Is it on my Slack? And then, if you're decentralized protocol, you go further into that before you can decide who you're having this relationship with. So the truth is that your phone, because of the grid out icon, and website because of the line of tabs, has divided up your digital life into these smaller verticals, each one basically owned by a company. It's a platform, whether it's Slack. And that's fine. People deal with that. We connect different aspects of our lives by saying, reach me here and that, and go via LinkedIn and stuff like that. And you have a bunch of logos, a bunch of links on your card or personal site. Same thing with companies that's in crypto. There's a line of icon, like reach us in these 15 different ways. That's the silos, right? That's the vertical silos of our lives. And I think that in the decentralized internet, we're going to actually possibly make that worse, because each of the silo will likely require its own token, its own wallet, its own plugins, and it will be not just a solution. It would be not making the problem better, but actually make it worse.
So exacerbating the silos is what you're saying. And we're already seeing that right now, Chris. We're actually seeing more of that as we see these dApps unfold.
Yeah, absolutely. And this actually adds to the urgency for us to figure out how do you not break the silos, because the silos allows us to build software in a compartmentalized way, especially with ecosystem. You want to focus, in a messaging ecosystem, this is the incentives of it. But the user shouldn't have to worry about kind of this incredibly difficult road into this nice ecosystem that's been built in insurance and all the different verticals that is in there. So for us, the opportunity in the blockchain is such, is that in the traditional world, if you are saying, I want to build a master social network browser or app that connects to 10 or 12 different social networks, you will actually have an easy time if you would start it 5 years ago. But ever since then, once you build this alternate app, the centralized platform don't want you to do that because they monetize through their gateway, their front door, going through their app and the attention data that they capture. In crypto, in blockchain, the incentives is different. Vitalik doesn't really care how people use the Ethereum network, whether it's the official Ethereum client or some better version of MetaMask or Toshi, whatever it might be, right? Because the network value is in the usage and the transaction volume. So the incentives is now aligned between the protocol designer at the lower level, level 1, 2, right, or maybe 3, and this experience layer, because we are bringing new customers, more transactional volume to the network. And I believe that unifying crypto and blockchain in a central experience layer, especially one that's open source, that can be forked and deployed in new ways, it's something that is more possible than in the centralized platform regime of the past.
Absolutely. So what's interesting also, we're talking about blockchain now, and you mentioned in your white paper, and also you've explained this personally, that you are based on a consensus protocol. So let's explore that specifically, because I want to understand more about your architectural design. You're not specifically a blockchain. Is that correct? So let's explore that in the context of your protocol nature.
So I think what we see is the blockchain in the different type of consensus mechanisms and trade-offs are essentially data stores, right? Data stores and networks. And in a unified application, in ones that the users tapping to different parts of their life, will probably likely to see multiple blockchain being used in the user's daily lives, and some of which have a more trustless nature and more expensive, and some of them maybe, you know, with a professional organization, more like a permission ledger. So that's all good. And to us, there's no reason to build another blockchain, because these blockchains provide capability, even for the Cardstack ecosystem, to do the value on the token, the staking and the rewards and stuff like that. For the metering, we can use a more scalable DPoS protocol to support metering on how many credits you have left in your Cardstack wallet. And then for communication, there are decentralized protocol and service storage and stuff like that. So we want to use the protocol that's already been invented in a way that allows us to be a part of this cohesive application experience. As far as our consensus layer, it's really a consensus layer of participation in the economic value that's being created. Because we see Cardstack as basically a next generation of app store that does not have the silo problem. But right now, because app store, you're competing, right? If you use my app and then you delete it and use another app, the other app gets all the value and vice versa, right? We see a different model. We see in sharing in the economic value you create. If I build a AI algorithm that helps people lives better, either in trading or in managing their finances, and that, you know, so many users spend so much money, and 10% of their usage was, you know, related to your algorithm, you should get 10% of something, right? Another person who came up with the image recognition algorithm to find your long lost friends should get 2%. So we see our consensus algorithm really is about, it can be built on top of Ethereum or other type of blockchain, but you know, the core logic is that this is a pool of revenues coming from people. Instead of paying software as a service vendor like Salesforce.com, you pay into a stake pool, and you basically say, this stake pool or this payment pool allows anybody who's writing open source software and creating decentralized protocol, if you offer your services in this cohesive way through this experience layer, I promise you, you can get a slice of my spend, my money. Right? And that creates a sustainable software ecosystem that does not require selling user data and privacy invasion, nor require one company to take all the money, like Apple, Google, Salesforce.com, and then distribute it kind of a little bit. They take in a lion's share. We see this as mostly about the community using a smart contract on a public network, pooling its money together, and then using that to attract development and attract people to actually fulfill the value. And until the usage of those open source tools and protocols are actually commenced, which we use a consensus protocol to analyze and submit back on chain. It's like, here's the split that we recommend, and we can do that in a decentralized way. We started with a kind of Oracle approach, and in the future, decentralize it so that members of participation is basically grading each other's homework, looking at the usage data and aggregate, and coming to consensus that this is a split that would be fair for this month.
Okay, so obviously you made it very clear that you're Bitcoin agnostic by the design with your protocol, and you're focused.
And Ethereum agnostic.
Yes. Okay, so Ethereum agnostic, but you are focused initially on Ethereum, as I understand, as an ERC20 token. Is that correct?
Yes. Absolutely. So the main stake pool in the token isn't on the Ethereum network because that provides not only because the tooling is really great, it allows us to ship a lot earlier, and it's been tested and it's easy to audit those things, and there's talent for that. So that's essentially where the payment and stake pool will be held.
Okay, so let's explore now specifically some of these solutions. You know, if we itemize them right down to, we've discussed the problems. If you could say in a nutshell, what are the specific solutions you provide to those problems that we discussed in detail?
I think, you know, we can look at this in both horizontally and vertically, right? Horizontally is people just want to see what a gentle and friendly on-ramp will look like. And it could be doing anything. Let's say we build a crypto portfolio tracker that taps into the Ethereum network and other blockchain to get the data and then get some price feed and then have your own database that's not on-chain because you may not want that the actual listing of your thing on-chain. And then you can host it and you can invite people in, and it's a permission system. And you can deploy it to your website. You can show some of that on your portfolio publicly as a disclosure, and some privately. You have more tools. You might use AI tools to analyze your thing, and you can use data visualization, and those are all coming from different developer in the open source way, and they all get compensated because you're paying $100 a month for these tools, and that trickles down the economy. That would be a great first app. But that's certainly not the last. If you have that basic operating model horizontally, then you can think about building a communication system. You can integrate with Aragon and actually have governance and voting built into that. As you augment your group, you know, the most important thing in blockchain is the human network that's been formed. So once you bring a bunch of people together, their tool sets can expand. Instead of bringing those same people, the same accounts and friends and relationship and add to context to different networks, you build the network and then you bring the tools within the midst of them. And those are what we call Card UI, which is each one of the tools that you use are modules that get added to your environment that you share with the people you build the trust with.
I see.
So I would say that we can start with almost any use case. We'd like to start with use case that's useful to people. And it could be crypto portfolio tracking. It could be just improving the on-ramp of the websites that people running for either their funds or their projects. They are now just kind of like a lobby, and then you go everywhere else on Telegrams and Slack and GitHub. What if we can bring those people together and have that website actually connect to the network, including the proprietary network or the special token of that project? How great would that be? So there are a lot of opportunity for us in the short term to deliver that cohesiveness to real problems we have today.
So clearly you've alluded to one key aim, and that is to customize, you know, a suite of options for different groups. Let's explore some of these key aims as well, Chris. Some of them are, you know, you stated in your white paper that you aim to encourage developers to work more efficiently via this modular design. Also, we've discussed the breaking down the silos, but also very importantly, bridging between the cloud itself and blockchain. So let's sort of unpack those comments in terms of your specific aims.
Yeah, I think developer already works quite efficiently, right? If you look at a developer that builds application, they look at what's available in the open source space. Sometimes they look at what's available in the commercial software as a service. They will subscribe to those things on behalf of the company and use the API. And as they build the application, they're assembling parts together and being thoughtful about what should be open source, what shouldn't be, and build that final experience from parts. And that's no different. Cardstack is not saying we invented open source collaboration. We didn't invent APIs. We didn't invent orchestration. All we're saying is that by bringing the blockchain to the same layer, the same table as if you're integrating with a REST service or some sort of web services, we have more opportunity for application to tap both into, oh, I need a price feed from this exchange or this information data service, but then I need to look at whether that holding is still in the wallet. That is currently a really hard problem to solve. Like some of those are coming through a plugin in MetaMask and the other one is not, and you need to host it. But with Cardstack, they're actually speaking the same protocol, the same language. And again, we didn't invent our own protocol. We're using existing open source protocols and agreements on how you basically integrate that stuff. So that's the kind of the nitty-gritty technology answer, is that if you bring things to the same abstraction level, allows that unified querying and view to happen, allow a unified security model, then you're more likely, maybe dramatically more likely, to see cross-pollination and tapping into different tools. To give you a concrete example, one of the key goals that we have in our own kind of journey is to use Cardstack Hub for what we do as we bring the Cardstack project to the community. And for example, to get community members validated to make sure that they can make contributions or they can be part of this kind of payment network, we need to do KYC. And that is a service that's not, while people are doing tokens for it, mostly is that data is in the cloud, like with vendors and AI vendors is doing that. But then you need that KYC to end up being a whitelist, and then you have to add that to the blockchain. So we're actually using Cardstack Hub to run that whole onboarding process for community members, plugging into various modules, including cloud module for KYC and blockchain modules for whitelisting, in one thing that just looks like a little checklist. Oh, step 1, 2, 3, 4. And that's going to be launching with our TGE process. So that's the MVP. The MVP is to show that this 31 module, I think 35 now that we have included in Cardstack Hub, includes modules that would be useful for people in crypto to leverage to build their own workflow. And once we've done it, then we have cut the time for the next person.
Sure, and once again, it's obviously open source by design, and certainly, certainly it's designed to be accessible for those who want to utilize it for their own productivity, for their own services. So I did want to allude to, the kind of people using that. Are we talking about clients in enterprise? Are we talking about the lay public? Who specifically are you referring to when you say user?
Users, yeah. I think, there is definitely a gap between the end user being able to go into GitHub and deploy an app. Obviously, we want to be able to get a point. It's like, I want Cardstack here. Click the button. Similar to some of the most polished web hosting company that we have. But that's going to take some time to get there. So right now, I think the most important adoption that we're looking for is developers to use Cardstack to build the blockchain application of their dreams. Tapping into modules already built, so to cut their time by 70, 80%, so they can get to that end user experience and focus not just on the plumbing, but on how do you express this really complex concept to end users. But one important thing, we're not looking to have blockchain developer necessarily build on top of Cardstack. We actually think that blockchain developers are actually partners working with us to build these plugins so that their blockchain or their protocol can be offered to this larger group of developers, which we call web developer application developers. Our focus, the most important adoption for us in the development community, and actually is the background that we came from in the open source community in JavaScript, is that we want application developers to now look at blockchain as just another service they can add to their tools. And right now, they don't see that because the tools are so different. It's almost you have to quit your job, leave your community behind before you can have the permission to go into blockchain and you're like working in low-level stuff. And that's a very difficult thing to get a large number of people. But if we make it so it's like, hey, do you want to add some Ethereum smart contract token curated registry on your pet walking app? That would be much better, right? And that's what Cardstack Hub offered. So we offered the opportunity for regular developer, app developer, front-end or middleware or back-end developer who are not blockchain developer to expose themselves to the capability of this protocol by shielding them initially from the nitty-gritty detail of what's going on in the clients and the and the drivers. But in the future, we want them to come in and actually say, hey, this is really exciting. I can go invent my own protocol. But that's going to take some time, and I want them to get settled down in our layer first before further exploration in the blockchain world.
Okay, so you've made it very clear that essentially for all developers who have an interest, and they don't have to have that background in blockchain, that you're providing a toolbox, essentially.
Yes.
And that's going to be key for those trying to really understand exactly what Cardstack is about. So let's explore even the terminology and the nomenclature of Cardstack itself, the card being very important, and the stack itself with its layered system, because you have, you have tiers. You have your layer 1, 2, and 3, orchestration, scalable payments, secure ledger, very fundamental to your tier design. Let's explore that and cards as well.
So I think it's very clear that the bottom layer, which is the blockchain layer, we're using Ethereum to get started, and we will support other protocol when they are ready for us to put all this amazing capability on it. But if we go like next level up, the next level up is really the smart contract, right? The smart contract that determine this decentralized software ecosystem, the incentive between the people who make the software, the host the software, and stuff like that. So we interpret that in the way that ensures fairness and allow them to have their identity and be able to be part of this ecosystem through paying fees and registering state.
And it also provides for automation. It removes middlemen.
Yes.
It's final, and it's secure.
Exactly.
Okay, but let's talk about though your card as well, and also very important the orchestration aspect as well.
Yes. So, once you have this smart contract layer for our ecosystem, our goal is now to tap into other things, go broader than our own little payment pool and reward pool. And that's where the orchestration layer happens. And the basic concept of the orchestration layer is that essentially, when you're tapping into a blockchain, you're not really caring about the blocks. You're caring about the data that represents some sort of business or transactional thing. It's an insurance, it's a payment, it's a membership, it's a registry, it's a permission, it's a ticket. There's this idea of what we call in software development a schema, a document schema. Okay. It is an object. It exists in its shape, and that's what we call a card, right? So on the back end, it's a schema, and we have a unified schema system. So if you have a concept of a user, and a user has a schema, that users could be stored on a blockchain, on a IPFS, or it could be stored on a more traditional database. Okay. It's the same schema. And once you have the schema and you have the fields, first name, last name, blah, 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 then you can draw a box on screen and lay out that beautifully, almost like a business card, maybe a little profile. And that thing can now be added to things. You can share it, you can version it. So the idea of card UI is translating this concept of schema, which makes a lot of sense to developer, we rely on it every day, to something that's as tactile, as powerful to end user, to grok that, oh, I met this person the other day, can I look up the card? And you can go and search on Cardstack because all these schemas are indexed for each person. It's almost like your searchable Gmail, except it's something coming through the blockchain and not coming necessarily through an email. And you can search them and search it by name. And every field that's in any schema that comes from different blockchain is now searchable. How powerful is that, right? So card UI is really about retrieval, this idea of the physicality of a piece of information. And once you remember, once you recall a word, you can always find it. And once you have it, you can say, I want to invite this person to this group. Now, whether that's drag and drop or tap and click doesn't really matter. We're still working on the design system to make that so that it's easy to learn once how to deal with cards and then use it in multiple apps. But when a developer comes along and say, I want to build a new thing about online ticketing, they only have to build the card that represents the schema of ticketing and build a blockchain to ensure the secondary sale and stuff like that. And then the rest of the system, the messaging and sharing is all already built into the open source framework. And then it just reaches that.
I see. So once again, reinforcing that you provide the tool and they can utilize that tool because you provided the card. So let's now explore this concept, moving beyond that to user-centric decentralization. Again, it's reinforcing this importance of the user from the top down, from the user-driven approach that you've taken. Why is it important to, discuss this?
Well, I think it's because it's very easy in the analysis of blockchain and the decentralization to disperse things and make sure everybody is not in control, and then we forget that at the end of the day, the user has to be the center. Otherwise, they're just addressed in this blockchain. They're like a little glimpse in that, and they have a record on this ledger, and they don't exist. and you have to go and take a little, like literally, pieces of paper of your private key to say, I guess I'm the sum of these keys.
Right.
And nobody cares. Like nobody acknowledges you other than a number on a ledger. And that's actually what's going on right now, because we don't really have a concept of user. And I like that idea, because the user should be either anonymous or pseudonymous. That's good. But for the user, I exist. Right. I want to know that I'm this address on Ethereum, or this 17,000 address on Ethereum.
Sure.
I want to know that I have these documents on IPFS, and I have control over that. Okay. So what we see in the re-centralization is not about an on-ramp. Say, okay, everybody's going to log into Coinbase.com or even Cardstack.com. We do not intend to be the place you log in to access the internet. We want you to have your own on-ramp, just use Cardstack software and participate in the mechanism.
Sure.
So you can go to BlockchainBrad.com. That's your on-ramp to the internet. But on that website,
use your tools to do so.
Yes, my tools. And then participate, and so that whatever you pay get dispersed to the community who build the tools that you end up using on your website or app or on-ramp or desktop app, whatever it might be. Okay. But on that website, on that hub, on your personal cloud, on your personal desktop or peer-to-peer app, you are at the center of it. Every ID, every address that you have is included in that system, and it goes and say, let me go and look out for BlockchainBrad on all this network to update it, listen for changes, see if there's any fraud going on for you, right? Because it has all the data about you that you give it. Now, nobody else has that data. It's maybe on your computer, on the cloud that you have an account for. Sure. You decide how you want to deploy Cardstack and how much control. Now, if you say, oh, I only want to pay $1 a month, I want to pay no money, then, well, someone may give you a multi-tenant free service, but then you have to sign up for terms of service. That's not all that different than what you get from Facebook. But if you're willing to pay, and this is the key, there has a responsibility here. If you're willing to use a wallet, use cryptocurrency, and then through Cardstack token to pay for the storage and the operation of the system that represent you, you are in control. And that's the re-centralization of the decentralized internet around the user.
I see. So essentially it's validating, providing for that autonomy, and allowing them to be, to control their own data as well. So if we could now explore your toolbox, as we alluded to before, we know it exists and you are a suite of options for the user.
Yes.
But there are specific tools in that toolbox, and some of them are your app framework, your aggregation protocol, and also your eco token. So in the sense of ecosystem. So can we explore those three tools in the toolbox?
Yes. So the application framework is the one that we have been working on since 2014. It's like, how do you do composable software on the back end and front end? And more importantly, how do you provide card user interface that is automatically tied to this synthesis or orchestration layer without the user or even the developer having to do a lot of repeat work, right? In the current web development world, you have to build the front end and then different team build the back end, and it's just a lot of coordination. In Cardstack Hub, it's kind of all inclusive around the idea of these schemas and documents and cards. And once you have that abstraction, the front end and back end, and in some cases, even the smart contract can be built for you.
Okay, so that's holistic. So you're holistic by design. You do it all together and package it.
Yes.
Okay, right.
Yeah, so that reduces a lot of things. And then the ecosystem token, you mentioned about it, it's really optional, but it's also crucial. It's optional in the fact that if you say, I love the Cardstack framework, I love the fact that they're MIT licensed, which is a very liberal open source license, do whatever you want. You can deploy in your enterprise and use it to integrate, retiree systems using the same card UI. We love it. That's just open source contribution. Right. Okay. But if you are trying to participate in an ecosystem where your tools are added to a toolbox and you get compensated based on the value of the network you build and the cash flow you get from customer who's paying for BlockchainBrad.com or .bit or whatever it might be, that I want those people to then say, okay, I guess I'm going to register my app in the ecosystem through paying a fee in the ecosystem token. I will, when I pay for application, I'll stake or deposit the token, and that's basically paying into the network. You don't get it back. Once you pay it, it gets dispersed to the makers and miners, the people who do the work. But that's like paying into a pool, and that creates value. And if you're a maker, if you are someone who's creating software, you'll be paid proportionally based on the value add in that token. And that token can help you pay fees or help you make partnerships, or it can be converted into something that allows you to pay rent.
Right.
And so that's really what the ecosystem token is about, right? There are some rules we want to refine. So, for example, if your tools is used a lot, it's dramatically popular. Power law and the network says that's most likely would be the case. When people, the community is standardized on one tool, we don't want to pay that person all the money, right? All the value, because that would create centralization of wealth. So we, in our ecosystem token, in our proportional attribution, we say, well, you're used everywhere. Let's make your total distribution still really nice, but let's leave some room to give to the people who are just starting out. And that's really hard to do in just Ether, right? If you just use Ether, it's very hard to say, well, I'm going to give you 3 ETH, but then I'm just going to give you 2 ETH, and where'd that go, right? But we have an ecosystem token built on top of a stake pool, and a stake pool is governed by the aggregation protocol, which is basically say the analytics of how to split it can be smarter than just if 1, then 3, then -3, these kind of smart contract arithmetic that we have. It can actually look at patterns, look at distribution, run statistical model on it, and make a recommendation like a big data engine or machine learning engine. Say, the community's algorithm decides, and the community can see what the algorithm is, that the split this way will follow this curve, and then and it's just much more equitable because we have the ability to do something more advanced than just arithmetic. So that's really what the aggregation protocol is. It allows us to encode our philosophy of fair attribution and allocation into a set of algorithm, then that settles out on chain, and then when it's on chain, it's just getting the Ether or getting the Cardstack token out of the stake pool. But the process of determination of that would probably make a much fairer system, because we have the ability to intervene and look at the whole network. Now, if you don't want to participate in that and say, I don't believe to it, you can build your own ecosystem token, or you can or not participate. But we really want to encourage people to align our economic interests, not only in cooperation, but also in competition, and so that this can actually be thriving, be diverse, and be interesting.
Sure, and obviously that's essential to thrive. You must have that token to really fuel your own inner economy. So we will explore that a little bit later in terms of your dual design. So it is important to explore it. But let's now really expand on some of the features and the benefits of Cardstack. You know, for example, for developers, for analytic miners, for the end users. You know, if you could just tell us a few, because you have many. But what if you could isolate perhaps 1 or 2? Even one. But you know, ones that really stand out.
Yeah, so let's start with developers first, because we've been already talking about it. I think for developer, you know, open source tool give you superpowers, right? Once you have the right tools and libraries and the right framework, you could do what you thought you could do in less time than you think you can possibly do them. And that's what Cardstack is going to offer in the short term, and hopefully in the medium term as well, is that we give you the ability to build blockchain application that is better than not just the current generation, because we have more tool set, but it makes you feel like you can express yourself in terms of what you see the decentralized internet. You can try, iterate, and go from there. And that's really important. We still need more people coming in, trying new things. I'm not building Cardstack for a particular future. I'm building Cardstack so that people can come in to co-create the future with us. For end users, these developers who are coming in to build these experiments need users. They need someone to tell them and give them feedback. And in return, you're going to experience blockchain in a much different way than today. Today, you got to get a hardware wallet because every other approach is kind of like a misguided detour, right? And that's not clear. Nobody tells that the first thing you should buy a Trezor Ledger. That's the only way anything makes sense, right? But nobody has ever told people that. They start from Coinbase, which is great, but it's not really why we're excited about crypto and the decentralization. Hopefully, with the apps that is deployed on Cardstack that people are playing with, they will have a third path to gently explore, maybe less of the cryptocurrency aspects of it, but certainly more of the decentralized network ecosystem aspects of it, especially with protocol that's already been built that we're tapping into, being the first time those protocol has ever reached a mass audience. And I think that's really about learning. End users will use Cardstack in the short term to access to learn what this is all about. In the future, they can build great businesses and personally make money and then maybe become full-time crypto people. Right now, education for end users about what blockchain is about is really my goal, and the benefits to the people who are willing to jump in. Hopefully, we make the cliff a little bit shallower and a little bit scary through Cardstack. And then for analytic miner, which is a very important concept for us, right? Because we are basically saying that to govern these networks, we need to go beyond just the simple arithmetics in smart contracts and starting looking at patterns in the network so that we can actually use what is basically the last 10 years of innovation in technology, which is looking at data sets, looking at patterns, making judgment call and decisions to help people lives better. Unfortunately, a lot of those machine learning and AI, data analytics, big data stuff is concentrated in a few big companies trying to lock down your data and do things to profit themselves and not necessarily to help the community in any way. So I want to shift that work and that knowledge and those two sets to essentially reapply them for community governance, right? To actually distribute payment, to attribute payment, to detect patterns of fraud, to slash stake, not based on simple arithmetic, but based on pattern detection. And to do that, you need a really, really powerful processing capacity. It just so happens that the crypto economy, especially in Ethereum community, we have the largest deployed capacity of GPUs in the world. And GPUs has paved the way for machine learning and AI for the last 10 years and made NVIDIA way more valuable than when they were a 3D game company. And so to me, the ability to turn a portion of that GPU deployed in the crypto world away from just, proof of work type of trust insurance to do some of the computation that could not be done on chain, so we can do it on top of layer. That will be a very powerful expansion of the imagination capability without necessarily having to worry about, well, how are we going to get this GPU, right? As at the end of the day, all we have to do is to make sure that people who are getting mining reward can get mining reward in Cardstack token, and they can now help govern this network and help do this aggregation. And that's a very important initiative for us because it allows us to do two things. One is community governance that's smarter than what we can do on smart contract, and two, and this is actually quite important, to ensure that the long-term role of blockchain replaces not just the financial system, but all the algorithmic, onerous control system that exists in the world of Facebook and Cambridge Analytica. We find a way to match it, but in a decentralized way where the algorithm is voted through a community process and deployed in an open source code, and more importantly, run by a competitive mining process similar to what we have today.
And I think you raised a very important point as well, Chris. Sorry to interrupt, but obviously you raised some very current problems we've raised even in Facebook as one, and certainly you alluded that with Cambridge Analytica. So no doubt, having that centralized control has raised very serious security problems for the user. What you want to do is redress it with injecting fairness back into the blockchain and democracy in a real sense, without trying to give lip service to the idea. So let's explore now how long you've been doing this, because obviously to do this kind of complexity, let's just get to the point. You are very complex. There's just no way around this. But to build it, you've taken a long time, I understand.
Yeah, I mean, we have been working on the framework aspects of it for 3 years on a team that's been focusing on what does the developer experience and what does the end user experience and how do they intersect. As far as the blockchain aspects of it, I was introduced to the blockchain world in August of 2014, when I had the great fortune to meet the founders of Ethereum, Vitalik, Joe Lubin, and at the time I was still in the kind of media capital in the world doing kind of enterprise R&D stuff, and I realized that particular types of innovation requires, like, you have to really invest in time to learn what it is. So I built a thing on the Bitcoin blockchain with op return, storing assets for digital art and provenance as my first project, and that was actually quite successful under the brand name of Monegraph. And for one time, we were actually like 25% of all non-financial transactions using op return on Bitcoin network when people were registering the artwork on our platform.
So clearly you had a lot of experience with the blockchain itself, and that would have led you very quickly into Cardstack, I imagine, because you have worked on that for a few years.
Yes, and Cardstack has been continuously underlying this experimentation on blockchain. Because Cardstack as an open source framework, a lot of learnings I made along the way about how to interact with systems and how to interact with blockchain systems, especially, we kind of deduced that into that framework. Now, Cardstack as its own kind of project, like that is going out there and actually basically say, we believe there's an ecosystem, not just a GitHub repository of Toolbox, but actually build this ecosystem. It's something we started in October 2016, when one of the gentlemen from MME, who is the law firm and tax advisory firm that helped form the Ethereum Foundation, came to our office and say, we need people like you, Chris, to come to the blockchain world to build things that are real. Right. And it took some time to figure out, okay, so if we have this open source framework that's useful, we have this idea of decentralization and re-centralizing user, what is the thing that we need to do in terms of ecosystem design? And a lot of the work that went into not only the technical design, but also the incentives design, crypto economics, compliance, legal compliance, tax compliance, because we're dealing with payments, that took some time to get there. So by the time we wrote the white paper, and we have one of the, most kind of like intertwined white paper, robust. Thank you. But we definitely want to like explain in a succinct way all the things we thought about in that 1 year leading up to the release of white paper around the September timeframe, September 2017. And then since then, we've been still like saying, we need to actually ship everything, not everything, but everything we think we need to ship to show that this is a minimal viable ecosystem by the time the TGE is concluded and the tokens are unlocked. So this is an aggressive project because we didn't want to say, oh, there's a token, it's going to be for software as a service. I could have came into the world in July and would have not a problem. But we wanted to do this right because to build a long-term ecosystem, you basically have one master plan, and while plans will change and building will change shapes and traffic pattern may change, but your master plan has to be roughly correct before this thing can really grow within that city's master plan. And so we're taking a deliberate approach, and hopefully we towards the end of that kind of initial journey to inaugurate this new group of residents, the community member, into this Cardstack ecosystem. But this is a town we're going to create together, and we have to play the different roles.
Sure. And Chris, to be honest, I'm sure many people would appreciate the time in which you've taken to evolve and build and be really assured with your team, and we'll discuss your team in a moment, because the reason why I broached this is we're seeing the opposite, happen time and time again, where there's a rushed approach for the ICO, there's a rushed approach for tokenizing what are arguably very, very simplified project designs that simply risk the overall integrity of this decentralized business model that we're seeing evolve. So let's now unpack something very important, and you did allude to this before, and that is your use case. So let's imagine now we have your suite of options in a real world of business. Can you specifically tell us exactly what the real world use cases are for you in the real world for the layperson?
Sure. So we mentioned the horizontal use case of things that everybody can use. Let's talk about vertical use cases. So, for example, one way for us to make sure that we're doing the right things, that we take on projects, we partnerships or in simple vendor agreement, and sometimes deeper agreement with a blockchain project that's working in a vertical industry. So one of which I've actually worked on in the last year and a half is a kind of more long-term, idealistic but still practical project of building a distributed music registry for media rights on the blockchain. And this is helpful, so you can know who wrote the song, who is participating, who owns the master right, and who has sold the rights. And right now that data is not quite available. Cardstack is interesting, right? Because we don't want to build a centralized registry, right, with that, because there are a lot of competing interests that doesn't want a centralization. So what we basically say is that, what if we take the Cardstack architecture and give every music company, whether it's a label or streaming service, a Cardstack hub? So that's their on-ramp to the network. And they interface with the network through this plugin. And that could be a plugin to a permission ledger or even a bunch of ledgers, some permission, not permission. Okay. The one that we experiment and build plugin for is for Hyperledger Sawtooth, which is the one that was donated to the Linux Foundation by Intel. And we've been working on that and building plugins. And again, that's not open source yet, but we have built Cardstack plugin for Hyperledger Sawtooth and with all these kind of streaming data back and forth. And once we have that, then we can say, okay, each organization can now customize their Cardstack Hub once they have connectivity to do whatever they want. They can connect to the UI, then the end user can say, hey, do I accept this change request for this new song, changing the songwriter name? Or they can run their own AI. They say, well, let's do that automatically and just say yes. Or they can connect to their own system and say, oh, I'm going to take this new record and update my enterprise system, which is running on a mainframe or running on a next generation software as a service. Doesn't really matter, right?
Okay.
So for us, like the ability to make Cardstack Hub and make it so that it is diversely customized in each of the participant, but around the ring of consensus and communication, you can use a blockchain to organize that. That's the best case scenario, right?
So what you make really clear is that the hub is the asset, essentially for the client or for the user in this case. So I wanted to move across now. You've made it clear that the hub is an imperative, and it is. If you do explore the white paper, any of you who are listening, certainly it's very complex, but also there's great diagrams that explain just how robust it is with many different facets. But I wanted to explore now the relationship between these hubs and these services with the revenue, with tokenization, and with the model. Yep. So how does that gel?
Yeah, so there's two aspects. We call it makers and miners, which is the general terms we use to distinguish people who have produced software or produced code or produced design and product that's being used in the hub. So you build a module or build a card, and that card is being used in one of the hubs of one of the music company or one of the user or artists, whatever it might be. So the token model will acknowledge that that piece of software is being used through something called cryptographical proof of usage. So it's basically log files, right? But log files that websites or application generates are usually very much clear text, and it can be scraped and it can be leaked and stuff like that. But we know we have cryptography in the browser and the server. Why don't we use a cryptographical signing language to say that that's an irrefutable fact, and more importantly, maybe the identity of the person who signed the message, it's proof that that person actually used the bet, but it's not clear who, because I don't need to know who used something for 20 minutes to pay the developer of the tool that someone used for 20 minutes. I just know that that cannot be forged, right? So this idea of cryptographical proof of message allows us to create that overall, trusted record that we can crunch down and create that distribution of wealth. So that's how you get, it's almost like a royalty for music. I think working on a music project for a year and a half really made me understand that if you made a song in the 70s, or you wrote a song or recorded a song in the 70s that still have cultural impact today, people still want to listen to it, you know what? You still get a check every month. Right. Well, that's not true in software and open source and even venture. Like if your company is out and you sold your founder share or you went out of business, that's it, right? And that means that people are very short term. Like, let's make as much money as possible in the shortest period of time. Let's inflate the value of this company and flip it, right? So by having this idea that you can build these software that have long-term value, as long as people keep using it, you get a slice of reward pool, aligns the interest for cultivation and improvement and not in competition and extraction, right? So that's the first part of the token mechanism for rewarding people to try to get the software out there and be useful and in part of people's life, and you get a proportion based on that. The concept of service provider or miners, miners is basically hosting something in a cloud to run some software. So they're kind of hosting companies, except they get rewarded. It's also a really important concept, right? Right now, if you want to say, I have a piece of open source software, let's say WordPress, that's like the most popular piece of open source software in the world, and that's very open. But when you want to host it, you give your money to one company, a web hoster, a WP Engine, WordPress.com, whoever it might be, and then they get all the money, right? And that's it. And for us, that's and then you don't. It's usually very hard to switch. Like once you
and certainly, sorry to interrupt. It's certainly not the user driven in that sense. It's top down driven from the the company.
Yes, and if you talk about proprietary hosting or proprietary software as a service or SaaS, that's even more login. That you choose them to host it, but you can't take your data because they actually own all the code. And the only way you can render your customer record in the CRM is if you use them. You can download all your records, but you can't. It's not useful. That's just a zip file, right? So the way we want to see is that once you have the software and you can run it all yourself on your computer, but let's be frank, you probably want it to be run on someone who knows how to operate the data center 24 hours a day, give you support, and keep it running. Like, keep updating whether it's your portfolio or keep updating your content and syndication feed, whatever it might be that your domain using Cardstack. So that way, if you do that, use Cardstack, those people who are hosting company will just get a slice of the reward pool. They'll get some of the money that would pay for the machines and they make their profit. So the maker, the software maker, and the people providing hosting are now participating in a much more level playing field where better hosting, better performance will get people to switch to the one, oh, I have better performance in Singapore. Oh, let me switch my Cardstack hub to be hosted in a data center close in Singapore. Or better yet, I want to host my Cardstack hub as an international organization in 15 jurisdictions, including China, right? And right now, there's really no way to do it. Maybe in the future, a token mechanism through the globalness of crypto will allow me to not have to have 17 credit card with 17 cloud provider, but just by having Ether and having Cardstack token, be able to say, I already paid for it. Build the reward pool, build the token mechanism, and then you can have this frictionless way of really standing up any type of software as a service, whether it's cloud or decentralized, using one unified token. That's the Cardstack token.
I see. Well, let's explore that now, because you mentioned you've got this one unified token, but in fact there is a dual design. So you have your utility token, but you also have a service coupon design that's pegged token. So let's explore both of them.
Absolutely. I think the way we have designed the ecosystem token, which is a utility token, is that token is basically the redemption of services against the network, right? So if you purchase 5 Cardstack token, now you get 5 Cardstack token worth of services from the network to run your website or run your accounting system or whatever it might be.
So it's essentially the services fuel that is injected into the system, and people then and the revenue comes from where? Like, so that the revenue comes from that injection of funds.
Yeah, so if someone if the aggregate customer puts $100,000 worth of Cardstack token into the pool, then there's $100,000 worth of money to be split amongst the makers and miners. So that's the basic idea.
And the benefactors are those that provide content or that provide, that contribute.
Yes, exactly, and determined by the proof of usage and the aggregation of that reports back on chain to say how to split the $100,000. So that's the primary purpose. It's quite simple. It's a staking token. There's some fees you need to pay. Very standard Ethereum style reward or payment pool. Now, with that being said, one important note about the Cardstack token is that we have this concept of a one-way function, which is if you're users and you're buying a Cardstack token, you stake it, you can't get it back. Like it's been spent. It's almost like you're buying a gift card, and once you get the gift card, like a Starbucks gift card or whatever, you can't say, can I give you money back? And if Starbucks prices, the stock price go up, you don't get more, right? It's really just putting in there for the purpose of rewarding the community, and it's gone.
So non-refundable.
Non-refundable. And that actually makes it a little bit interesting because it allows us, like phone cards, because it's non-refundable, it allows it easier to, in the future, as we work out the regulatory structure and the banking infrastructure, to treat the fiat to Cardstack token as a e-commerce transaction and not a trading transaction. So it's a little bit less regulatory hurdle to go through to say if it's non-refundable, basically your investment value is zero, right? Whatever you put in, you get zero back, but you get utility, you get actual utility. Then we can basically just have vendors around the world that has merchant account sell Cardstack credit, non-refundable one, the way they sell phone cards, maybe even in person, right? And so that would really get a lot more fiat into the Cardstack network by making it one way. And then when it comes to backing it up, the other way, it can come as payroll. So there's proof that you've done the work. So it's not investment gain. It's actually, I performed that many gigabytes of services, or I offer this much software and royalty that I've gotten, or reward that I've gotten. So that also makes it slightly easier, but that's a longer term thing.
Sure.
But certainly getting fiat into the Cardstack ecosystem is really important to the healthy development of the incentive of people really wanting to participate in and deploy the software where the customers and the spends are. Right?
Absolutely. And it also provides for a degree of stability because there is that pegging utilizing the USD as well.
Yes, exactly. So the second part of it is how you price the service, right? So, most token ecosystem price the service by the utility token price, which, as you know, can fluctuate quite wildly. But the great thing about services that is, especially initially, redeem, let's say, hosting from the cloud, is that price is pretty stable. So we basically say, if I'm going to host BlockchainBrad.com on Cardstack and make that the community on-ramp and have all these tools set to connect to smart contracts and also CRM system, let's say that's what we're going to build with you. The cost of that service on the cloud is pretty much fixed to USD, right? Maybe gigabytes a month is this dollar amount, and the service and search engine is this dollar amount. So we created something called a software and services coupon, which is pegged to USD, which is just another way of saying the service you redeem is priced in USD. Right. Because that's what mostly the tech world is priced at. So while we have this possibly fluctuating utility token, when you convert it into this service and a software service coupon, you get the USD value of whatever equivalent of what you would pay on a credit card if you were to do it outside the token mechanism, which means you don't pay more.
Right, and you inject stability of value into the system, which is an imperative, especially in the climate we see now.
Absolutely. So if you essentially bought the Cardstack token and then Cardstack token kind of went up in price, you can redeem more services for the same that you bought. So kind of discount, early bird discount. If it went down in price, then that's just the nature of cryptocurrency. Right. But one of the things we want people to be able to do is say, let's say you don't want any exposure towards the volatility risk. You can actually convert your Cardstack token that you have staked into software and services coupon immediately. I see. At the price of the arrival. Then you can now get for sure the value that you get. And we encourage most people who are using for utility, which hopefully is a vast majority of the Cardstack ecosystem, to basically just use Cardstack token as a way to make sure that there is a measurement of value that reward the makers and miner, but for the metering and what value you get immediately converted to a much more stable SSC.
Very interesting that you've done that way, because we talk about stable coins at the moment. They're a hot topic, and you've sort of built one into your own design. Can we talk now about your partners, because that really is fundamental to the driving force, especially from the beginning when you have your seed rounds, and obviously you've done part of your ICO already, and we'll discuss that in a moment, but you would have had to have had great backers to push you through to where you are. So let's talk about that, and then let's talk about the real partners that you know of now that many people in the world would not know, because you're in the hot seat. As the director, the founding director, you know what's going on in the future, what's planned.
Yes. Absolutely. So let's put it this way. We are very fortunate that when we decided to start the Cardstack movement, it wasn't even a project. There was no source code when I say Cardstack, this is my vision. And a lot of my talks about Cardstack vision is still on our website. So you can check out, for example, a talk on stacking the card deck about, pushing back on the Facebook, Google silos very early on, before there was much of a line of code that represent the Cardstack hub and the ecosystem today. We took a different approach than most startups. We decided that the only way we can find value is to deliver value. Right? So we've worked with companies, whether it's enterprise customers who's like, I'm really interested in Cardstack, can you use Cardstack to build some tools for it? And then we just like, okay, great. This is an opportunity for us to work on the Cardstack platform and the open source library that we care about while making some money. But also, more importantly, testing our assumptions against brutally honest real world problems, right?
Right.
That allows us to be really practical. So we built a new membership system that allows public engagement membership for a membership organization that's 100,000 users. So we have 100,000 users using Cardstack software and modules, right?
Right.
And those are the things that basically provided the fuel for us to keep going. We also have done work for others open source project. We were approached by the folks that's behind the Drupal open source project, and they want to build something using the card, and then we did some work with them. And we have done other works in partnership, including in the music business and many other engagement that we have taken. And those types of software are the funders, right? Those are the basically the fuel that allow us to get to a point where we can say, we've got the shape of the solution, let's expand the community and go out there. And then we're lucky to have then met the partners we've listed on the website, which is, for example, the law firm MME that has structured the Swiss Zug-based entity, and with Bitcoin Swiss, who is a great crypto company that kind of started the whole Crypto Valley movement when they were there, and one of the first Crypto Valley company. They really connected us to people who believe in blockchain to give us that kind of initial contribution to jumpstart the project, and also helping us with compliance and KYC and AML, so that this project, from a Swiss regulatory point of view and a financial market point of view, is in good shape with the right banking relationships.
Right. So they've been fundamental to that beginning. But let's now talk about some of the enterprise interests that you know of, because again, you are privy to that information. Surely there are other people considering partnering with you for their own benefits.
Yes. So we're seeing two types of partnership discussion that's going on right now. One is on top of the Cardstack use case, as people trying to use our use case to build the ecosystem. And the other ones are blockchain projects that are interested in reaching a larger community through basically cooperation with other projects using Cardstack as that kind of orchestration layer. So we are having continuous conversation in my travels, especially. I traveled the world for about 4 or 5 weeks in Hong Kong, in Zurich, in Tokyo, and London, and try to talk to people, not about the TGE. I mean, the TGE with the community support is something that I feel so blessed to be part of that whole process of learning and exchange of ideas. But as far as the future partnership is concerned, what you're going to see from Cardstack is that we will speculatively design protocol plugins in partnership with a lot of these projects, so that whether that's a stable coin or whether that's a decentralized exchange, their capability can now be part of that orchestration hub that we see. And maybe in the beginning, we don't really know what to use it for. We're just like, now you can tap into this capability if you call these APIs. But in the future, especially when the use case on top presents itself, it would become very interesting. I'll give you an example for that. So let's say you want to use, you want to build a decentralized healthcare information system, right? That's one of the fields that we got some inquiries, a couple of inquiries about. And you will probably need to store files somewhere. You want to permission data to some people, and all that things will probably need to tap into multiple blockchain. Some of those may have their own tokens, right? So you may be using Filecoin when it launches in the future for storing certain type of, either encrypted or sensitive data. Now, if you're using Cardstack token as the way to pay for your on-ramp, how do you get Filecoin if you don't already have it? So this is where the use case comes in, when the partners we have in maybe the decentralized exchange and the partners we have on the, let's say, healthcare industry will intersect. They will use fiat to get Cardstack token so that they have the deposit necessary to run the app. But when they need Filecoin, we'll just go to a decentralized exchange and say, let me exchange some Ether or Cardstack token for Filecoin. And you get the Filecoin and automatically deposit on the user's behalf using the Filecoin client in the Cardstack plugin, and just deposit it and do that. And that could be just in time, which has some little delay, or there could be a little bit of supply where you predict the need of how much Filecoin do I need today, and then you get it like the night before, right? And you can replenish the supply, and that could happen to multiple protocol. And that's why we want to pursue partnership, both in terms of protocol partnership on the plugin level and partnership on the front end. Now, with that being said, we cannot do all the work ourselves. Yes, we began as a company where we're working on open source framework and delivering client solution at the same time to keep us honest, but also to make money and to be able to grow our operation and high grade people. In the future, what we see, and this is the type of partnership we're beginning to pursue, and you're going to see some announcements, is that we're working with agencies. Very soon, announcement for agencies that we're onboarding to train them to use Cardstack, where their staff is actually using our open source tool to build the solution. Right? That way, we can build a network of Cardstack certified, solution provider, let's call that are properly trained. Maybe they come to New York, or we go to them and we train them to how to do it, and they will engage and empathize with the customer and deliver the value. And those are the best way for us to get more users and businesses on the Cardstack, not by having Cardstack the organization, and we will build multiple organizations supporting the foundations around the world, right? And that's what we're working on now in the in jurisdiction.
So, Chris, in that respect, clearly you're optimistic, for want of a better word, or clearly you're certainly privy to this information, and therefore, and thus confident more so that you are going to expand not only your user base, but certainly your partnerships to become a much more well positioned entity. Yeah.
Exactly. And then I believe that the blockchain projects, fellow blockchain project has not been really tapping into that distribution network of, software development agencies and stuff like that. They typically are like, I want blockchain developers, forgetting that there's a huge opportunity to engage and empower and reward, right?
So Chris, in that respect, would you argue that you really haven't seen anyone in the competitive space do what you're doing? Are you reasonably unique in your whole design?
Well, I think there's a lot of unique aspects of the Cardstack token. As far as the go-to-market strategy, we really haven't seen that yet. A lot of our conversation internally, also with our advisors, some of which has been announced, and we're going to put a press release out there and show the advisory board. We focus on people who have previous experience running software businesses and understand how to tap into channels or value-added resellers to distribute software in a broad way. That is not changing. Like, decentralized software still needs people to empathize with the customer, to be local with them, to be able to understand their needs and adapt to the conventions and cultures. And that is not necessarily done through meetups. I mean, yes, it would be great to have meetups everywhere to get organic support of open source stuff. But on the solution delivery, no, I see very few blockchain companies taking that approach. I would say this, on the private permission ledger part, IBM is doing a great job providing solution and explanation and education to enterprises that are curious about blockchain, and they have Hyperledger Fabric and they have Composer, and they use it as a way to kind of really build up this initial set of POCs and excitement around enterprise blockchain.
But they are closed. They are certainly closed.
They are closed, and they're very vertically integrated, right? It's their blockchain, their consultants, their UX. If we can build a more open version of that taps into multiple public network and really be able to have a much wider tool set to choose from, and engaging a much more web development community that already knows how to build amazing user experiences, which aligns very well with Cardstack kind of consumer quality enterprise offering kind of orientation. I believe that's a huge advantage.
I would agree. And also, to do that, you need a reasonably good team. And you do have a team that's growing. You're hiring more people. Obviously, with your seed funding, you're utilizing some of that. So, how confident are you as you evolve as a team?
Well, I think from a technical talent and understanding, bringing designers and bringing product manager on board, my reputation in the field and my general orientation towards my way of working, it's a natural kind of a beacon for people to look and say, hey, there's a good team there. Ed Faulkner, who's a former Akamai MIT Media Labs lead developer. I work with Hassan, who's a lead blockchain developer on various blockchain projects, and even before that on various types of enterprise projects before, and he was formerly of Sun Microsystem. We attract just by our thing. People who want to solve hard problems with people who care about.
So what kind of numbers
solutions.
are you attracting? Because obviously you're saying you're attracting quality and you want
Yep.
quality, but how many? What are the
Yep.
numbers? How are they building in terms of your team?
I think it's important in the early stage, especially for the core team, for us to deliberately build, add people kind of slowly. It's almost like adding eggs into cake batter. You don't want to add 17 at a time. You want to add water slowly so it can congeal, so the team can come together. Now, obviously, working with our partners to deliver solution and work on vertical application and use cases, we can go that somewhat in parallel. Like once we have the training toolkits and stuff like that too. But as far as core team is concerned, I'm going to take a more deliberate approach to make sure that each person comes in, adds a new dimension, but have the time to learn from each other to truly share that information.
So I think it clear that you're being very selective, and also given that there's such an influx in the number of projects that are evolving, clearly the demand is high as well.
For sure. And then, obviously we want to be able to deploy 5, 6 different client teams to do 5, 6 projects together. But I do believe that to guide the framework forward, we need to make sure that the use case we choose are doable, impressive, and when you're done, and more importantly, useful when it's deployed. So we're going to be continue to be very selective for our core engagement and our core team. Now, with that being said, the area we're going to expand a lot more quickly is in communications and marketing support. We've been a very technically oriented organization. If you look at the weight of the people that we have, we're mostly engineers, support people, communication people, really great, but underweight.
Sure.
And I think even as we now engage in the community, it's very clear that we need to do more and make Cardstack more out there. And we're working on branding project, bringing consultants. And I think since we have a media center here in New York, we're tapping the resources here. But as we expand in different jurisdictions and we open new offices, we're going to tap into local talents there, so that we can actually tell the story of what the great work we're doing as well as the work we're doing. Right? Like right now, we feel like Cardstack is much more impressive if you look underneath than outside, and that should not be the case.
Right.
We should really invest in that. That's a commitment that I'm going to make to the community.
And we appreciate that because it's certainly reflected in the sheer nature of the decentralized space right now. I mean, given that there's so many people involved in trying to present information from the grassroots, literally people who are trying to better understand the utility, they're leading the way right now, and you're respecting that by addressing it and really taking the PR to the fore. So let's explore now your position in terms of the market, because we alluded to this before with regard to you having done your seed rounds, you have gone through an ICO process. Where are you at specifically now in the continuum? And let's talk about exchanges in that context as well.
Right. So, we are currently right now wrapping up our pre-sale. Obviously, we hit our soft cap quite a while ago. We had a public pre-allocation. So all that stuff is allowing us to really grow and fulfill and accelerate the mission. It is really, really important for us to get tokens in the hands of the end users. That is the entire value proposition of a utility token. And that's why the TGE, which will be scheduled very, very soon, would allow us to take the engaged community. We have a lot of people express interest. We have database and list, and we're coming through, and we want to invite them and say, hey, here's the Cardstack token. Thank you for your contribution, and now you can start using it on the day the token's unlocked.
Right.
As far as exchanges and what the market will see for the Cardstack token, which is the ERC20 token, as a nonprofit foundation, it's not something we engage in directly. However, I know the community member who's spoken to me in person, they have approaches. They want something for the ecosystem. They want something. They want to use their connection, and they want to use their goodwill, and they want to use their skill set to contribute. So we will see a lot of interesting activity around that. But that's going to come from them, and it's and hopefully we will be able to see a wide variety of solution to bring more people into the Cardstack token, whether that's in the more traditional kind of more trading oriented approaches, OTC, or the one that I'm pushing for, which is providing fiat on-ramp through this e-commerce purchase of software credits, which provides just the same amount, if not way more, transactional volume that is meaningful to a token ecosystem.
Right.
And we want to accelerate both effort and do it in parallel.
And what's exciting is you have these clear plans. So that fits well with the segue of roadmaps, in that if you could tell us 2 or 3 things, perhaps, Chris, with regard to really what is going to hit the nail on the head this year in 2018 for specific points that you want to achieve.
I think the first thing is to make sure that people can use Cardstack and play with it. And we are creating a almost like a Cardstack playground called card.space, all right? And this is in the white paper. Whether that becomes the future of Twitter or future Medium, we don't know. But we want to definitely have some place that people can go and play with Cardspace without any token. Now, if you have tokens, then you can create BlockchainBrad.card.space, right? That's your own space, and that gives you more sovereignty and more control, and you can install and try different things out. That is super important, because unless someone plays with the blockchain through our experience layer, maybe it's a toy, maybe it's not the full vision, it may not do crazy stuff, it may not have $1 trillion of transactional value, but it has this tremendous educational value to actually play with things and to tactilely understand what the capability of Cardstack would be. And it also allows us to try new things.
Sorry to interrupt, but when is that likely to be possible in this roadmap so that we can contextualize this in terms of time?
We expect that to be within 1 quarter of the conclusion of TGE to have a fairly rich set of end-user accessible tool, basically wrapping a lot of the plugins already made in the kind of hub or backend layer into physical cards that people can play with. So that's one really important project that we want to do, and that's a development that's done by our team. So it does not necessarily require a large number of like ecosystem participation, which actually is it's a big risk, right? So you build this amazing API or ABI or blockchain protocol, and for 6 months, people don't hear about you, or they hear about other things and they accept other things, and then nothing happens, right? So I think for us, the most important thing is that our first deliverable should be on us. Like taking the trust the community giving us and like showing you at least the first version of something. And Cardspace, again, is based on an open source tool, and people can make it and use it and derive it something else and say, oh, I can take this code and make something totally different. But they need to see it first, and that's what Cardspace is for. And that's in the white paper. This our next goal. The second thing that we're going to focus on is actually a little bit different than what people think that a blockchain project should be. We're actually going to be working on the design system. A design system is a reusable catalog of objects and components that makes it easier for you to put together a new application from the parts. For example, there's a design system for Google Android called Material Design. And you see developers like putting together Google-looking things with sheets and shadows and boxes and buttons and banners and stuff like that really fast, because they were able to tap into this existing code base of pre-built, beautifully styled, typographically correct things. So we're going to work on that. The reason being is that I actually want to invite designers and front-end developer to experiment with what does it mean to build decentralized application. Are the primitives of a decentralized application exactly the same as the radio button and drop down and accordion? Or is it different? So we're working on that, and because we believe that if we build a design system around cards, which we call it the 4 edges of the cards, card has 4 edges, so it's a 4 edges design system, that will accelerate the development for these, whether it's agency or community members, because they can put together a beautiful application through these pre-built components and themes and stuff like that much faster. So that's a second commitment we're going to make. And that may probably take 2 quarters for us to get to that point. Now, IBM in the blockchain world has a design system called a Carbon design system. Salesforce.com, which is one of the top software service companies, something called Lightning design system. The people behind this project are amazing. I've talked to some of them, and I am really inspired by the idea of building a decentralized, open source, community-driven design system, not just a corporate design system, right? And that would be something that we're going to invite people in the product field, in the design field, and the user experience to work with us, so we can have something that becomes something that you don't need to necessarily use Cardstack Hub underneath it. You can connect it directly to your own blockchain, but we certainly want them to
Chris,
use the design system and connect it all the way.
What's really exciting is you clearly know some of the things you want to achieve. You have a very fine finite understanding of this what you're doing, and then you have this goal that you're leading with your team. So, Chrissy, could you tell us, perhaps in a final summary, what is this final statement you'd like to say to the audience, who clearly, Cardstack is tough to understand. Again, no point, kidding around. It is complex, but if you could unpack it, simplify it, and summarize it, what would you like to say as a final statement that really concludes this robust discussion we've had today?
Yeah, I think one way to look at Cardstack is that, Cardstack will be successful when you don't see it anymore, right? When the on-ramps, the places you go and the website you go and the app you use and future interfaces are actually built on Cardstack's principle of decentralization and multiple people contributing to a unified experience. Aggregation is necessary. We have to bring this stuff together. But aggregation creates the danger of centralization every time. The web was extremely distributed. Everybody had the web server. But because people can't find anything, a company or two or three, the last most successful one called Google, say, let me index the web for you. And somehow the Google became the centralized point where we enter the web only through Google, right? And that's the risk. If you don't design aggregation without centralization at the protocol level, in the ecosystem design, with the software, culture that is, informed by the open source ethos and the cryptographical kind of spirit, right? Like crypto spirit.
Sure. Then it can be manipulated.
Yeah, it's going to fall back to, let's log into Coinbase.com. Let me show you everything that I'm going to do. Nothing against Coinbase. I think that's great. And I want competitions in terms of user experience. But let's make sure that we take this one opportunity to make sure that the protocol that we work so hard to design doesn't get centralized effectively through the distribution channel. Absolutely. So if you see many diverse on-ramp with different look and different languages and different culture, and then you look inside and some parts of Cardstack in there, that's when we have succeeded. And that's the vision I want to be. So this is a really strange concept of, I'm going to push forward with a very well-defined plan with my team with the goal of losing control of it. With the goal of letting the community, through token mechanism, algorithm design, open source modules, just disperse it. And at the end of the day, Cardstack, the team that built the basic modules and the first of something like the Ethereum plug, would just be one of the developers receiving a monthly reward pool payout for the contribution we made to the network, much like that musician from the 70s is revolving the royalty check for the cultural meaning. And that's where we want to be.
Well, we appreciate that, because you are trying to be authentically decentralized, and that is not something commonplace, quite honestly. Many of these are essentially pseudo-decentralized startups we see who genuinely want to become businesses that, really garner profits. You're a non-profit organization, and you genuinely want to be there for the user, and hence you are user-driven. So on behalf of all the people who wanted to know more about Cardstack, you truly have provided a very, very comprehensive report on what Cardstack is, right from its tech to its user base, the intentions behind the project. Once again, to reaffirm to all the audience, you are the experienced layer of the decentralized internet with the focus on the layering component. You are open source framework, and you are all about that consensus protocol that's really going to build out this suite of options that can be applicable to a multitude of different applications. So on behalf of all the people wanting to know, thank you for explaining the software elements that and your architecture, and we look forward to following you as you enter into the marketplace, as you become applicable in various industries, and arguably become a mainstay position for what you're trying to do.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the great questions, and thank you for the thoughtfulness in the analysis that you did to allow us to really focus on the most important aspects of what is a complex technology, but an absolutely crucial movement that we need to support.
No problem. Thank you very much. You are the founding director. Thank you very much, Chris Tse.
Thank you.